Have you had people reach out for advice on their own journey? I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So first it was like lose 10,000 followers. Death threats, crazy people saying the most vile things you can imagine. Lots of people, some people who I was acquaintances with being like, you've betrayed me. This is the wrong decision, attacking me. And then lots of positivity. And then I started to gain followers back. And a lot of them were Christian or people who were discerning religion. And then over time, it sort of became this thing where now a lot of the religious messages I receive are people discerning religion or having questions. And then over time, people who in the past have been vile to me or I've fallen out with, or people who even criticized me when I first converted are now like apologizing and being like, well, can I ask you a question? And so I've been like pretty deep in kind of almost doing apologetics for like a crazy amount of people. I've thought about making videos about just some simple questions, like the amount of people who have just asked me like, how you're a rational person, how can you believe in God from a rational standpoint? And I think there are lots of good reasons to believe in God from a rational standpoint. I mean, beginning with just like the Big Bang, the universe has a beginning, which means there wasn't always material in the world, so that must insinuate an immaterial start to the material world. And that's a pretty good argument. Like you tell that to someone and they go, huh, you know, and then they have to science the gaps to fill the space, you know, which then of course we could go out of the gaps of space. But it's interesting. So I've been answering a lot of those questions and then a lot of theological questions too, which has been interesting. And then every once in a while I'll get a Protestant follower or friend who's like, let me ask you a question about saints or Mary or what's the deal with icons or things like that. So it's made me have to like up my apologetic ability, really.
The less we see each other as a threat, the more open we are to dialoguing with each other, right? So, you know, Catholics and Protestants have been separated for 500 years. We use language differently. Often it feels like Protestants are trying to misunderstand what we mean when we say things, and I'm sure vice versa, where it's almost like the Protestant might say to the Catholic, you just read an apologetic point from your Catholic apologetic book 15 years ago, and you haven't even bothered to actually dialogue with a real Protestant about what we mean when we say this, right?
Yeah.
The point is, when we can just not be a threat to each other, we can say, well, what do you mean by it? And another thing I try to do when I'm dialoguing with Protestants is make it clear that, yes, I want you to become Catholic, as opposed to pretending I don't.
Yeah,
like,
I do that same thing. Yeah. I dialogue with a lot of people who
I
are
want you to become Catholic, but I understand that if you don't do that, like, I love you, and like, especially if we're people we've been friends with, you know, in the past.
I've done that with Catholicism to my like to my religious brothers and sisters who aren't Catholic, and I've done that in terms of just Christianity with people who dialogue with me who are like, well, I'm like, of course I think I'm right. And I want you to take part in this, you know, and I make that very clear. I think that helps people a lot, where you're just like overtly like, yeah, obviously this is working great for me. I feel amazing. There are like physical, mental, and emotional benefits to this that aren't even spiritual. So like, come on in, the water's great, but I'll answer your questions too. So that's been good. But yeah, the amount of apologetics I've done. But I have felt really great about the ecumenical sort of brotherly love I've received. A lot of Protestants really have been incredibly positive and like super cool about it.
Nice.
And so I like that. I think that especially in our modern times, it's such a way that like there's clearly a shift between like family oriented people and people who were just kind of like doing something else, paganism. I don't know. Yeah. And so it's negative and not great. And I think a lot of people are kind of like, you know, so many people, like a lot of people reach out to me and been like, wait, so you don't watch porn? That's a huge one where they're like, how? And I'm like,
oh, it's beautiful.
And then my response is always like, the fact that you're asking me how I don't tells me you have a problem. And then they're always like, wow, I guess I do, you know? And then I'm like, yeah, you do. It's really bad for you. Because I've been pretty unapologetic about talking publicly about like, oh yeah, I've like desexualized my Instagram. I still follow or I'm friends with people who are like in the business of being lewd or whatever. Like, I'm not going to just cut these people out of my life. I want to be there for them. And I've answered some of their questions, and I think I've helped some of them in a big way, but I also am not going to consume their content and stuff. So while I want to do things like be in the world but not of the world, I definitely also have like muted and like done my best to like maintain my own personal boundaries. And I think that's been like so good for my brain that when I talk about it, other dudes are like, huh, really? And I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. You're going to rewire your brain and feel so much. It's going to make your relationship better. Like if you're married and you're going to like, if someone posts bikini photos, even on Instagram, mute them immediately. Mute everybody who does anything like that and watch how much better it makes you feel about your wife. It really will. Like, and so I've preached that, and a lot of people have been like, wow, it's really working, which has been really cool. So even just small lifestyle changes like that, like giving people a taste of the Christian life and then being like, and look at the fruits of this logically, how much better you're going to feel about women and see women in your relationships with people are going to change and rewire your own brain. And like, that's just from like a logical standpoint. Now come over here and see all the other stuff we have to offer that's going to make your life more fulfilling and better. So I think that's like the strategy for me lately. So it's been good, but I really have like a lot of my online presence nowadays has been spent just answering people's questions.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.